I stand here, beneath the relentless sun, my bare feet burning against the cracked earth of the Nile's edge. The river glints like a blade, sharp and unyielding, its waters promising life but delivering toil. My hands, rough as the papyrus I weave, tremble as I bind the stalks together, each twist a silent prayer for strength. I am Merit, daughter of no one, sister to none, a woman of Thebes in the shadow of the great pharaohs. My story is not carved on temple walls, not sung by poets in the courts of Amun. It is whispered in the dust, in the sweat that stings my eyes, in the ache of my bones at day's end. To be a woman here is to carry the weight of the gods' indifference, to live a life unseen, yet bound by chains no one names. I was 16 when I learned what it meant to be born a woman in this land of eternal stone. The air was thick with heat that day, and the scent of lotus flowers hung heavy, masking the bitterness of my fate. I had no choice but to walk forward into a world that demanded everything and offered nothing in return. My mother died when I was a child, her body frail from years of grinding grain, her spirit broken long before her breath stopped. She left me with nothing but her warnings, hissed in the dark as we lay on our reed mat. Beware the men who smile, she said. Their promises are as fleeting as the desert wind. Beware the priests who claim to speak for the gods, for their words bind tighter than any rope. I didn't understand then, not fully, but her voice lingered, a shadow that followed me through the years. I grew up in a village of mud brick houses, where the women rose before dawn to knead dough, fetch water, and weave cloth until their fingers bled. We were the backbone of this place, yet our names were never spoken with reverence. The men built temples, sailed the Nile, and fought for pharaohs. But we were the ones who kept life flowing, like the river itself. I learned early that to be a woman was to be invisible, valued only for what your hands could produce, what your body could endure. At 16, I was given to Horemheb, a scribe with a sharp tongue and sharper ambitions. It was not a marriage of love, but of necessity. My father, a farmer with debts heavier than his harvest, saw me as a bargaining chip, a way to secure favor with a man who could read the sacred hieroglyphs. Horemheb's house was larger than ours, its walls painted with scenes of gods and kings. But it was cold, hollow, like the tombs that lined the cliffs beyond the village. He looked at me with eyes that weighed my worth, not in my laughter or my dreams, but in my ability to bear him sons. I remember the first night, the way his hands moved without tenderness, the way my voice was swallowed by the darkness. I learned to silence my heart, to let it beat quietly, like a bird trapped in a cage of ribs. Each morning, I rose to grind grain, to clean, to serve, while Horemheb sat with his scrolls, his world of ink and papyrus untouched by the dust that coated my skin. The years passed, and my body became a map of labor calluses on my palms, scars from the loom, a back bent from carrying water jars heavier than my own weight. I bore Horemheb 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. But only the son brought a flicker of approval to his face. My daughters, Nebet and Kia, were beautiful, with eyes like the midnight sky. But to him, they were burdens, mouths to feed until they could be traded for alliances or dowries. I held them close at night, whispering stories of the goddess Hathor, who danced with joy and protected mothers. I wanted them to believe in something softer than this world, something that could cradle their spirits when I no longer could. But even as I spoke, I felt the weight of my own lies. Hathor's love was distant, a myth carved in stone, while our lives were etched in pain and survival. The village whispered of my husband's rise, how he gained favor with the priests of Amun, how his name was spoken in the halls of Karnak. But they did not see the cost. Horemheb's ambition was a fire that consumed everything, including me. He demanded more work, more silence, more submission. When I faltered, when exhaustion made my hands slow or my voice sharp, his anger was swift, a whip of words or worse. I learned to hide my bruises beneath my shawl, to smile when the neighbors asked how I fared. The other women understood. Their eyes held the same quiet resignation. We were sisters in suffering, bound by the unspoken rule that our pain was private, our strength invisible. Yet, in stolen moments by the river, we shared fragments of our hearts, stories of lost dreams, of children who didn't survive, of husbands who saw us as tools, not souls. One day, a festival came to Thebes, a celebration of the Nile's flood. When the river swelled with life and the city pulsed with music and offerings, I stood at the edge of the crowd, my daughters clinging to my hands, watching as the priests carried statues of the gods through the streets. The air was alive with the scent of incense and the sound of drums, but my heart was heavy. I saw Horemheb among the men, his chest puffed with pride, his voice loud with boasts. He had begun to speak of taking a second wife, a younger woman from a wealthier family, one who could elevate his status further. I was no longer enough. My years of labor reduced to nothing in the face of his greed. The realization cut deeper than any wound, a betrayal that burned in my chest, hotter than the sun above. I wanted to scream, to tear the air with my rage, but I stood still, my daughter's small hands anchoring me to silence. That night, as the festival's echoes faded, I sat by the Nile, its waters black and endless under the stars. I thought of my mother, her warnings now clear as the river's current. I thought of my daughters, their futures hanging like a storm on the horizon. I could not let them inherit my chains. For the first time, I felt a spark of defiance, a flicker of something stronger than fear. It was not a plan, not yet, but a feeling, raw and unformed, like the clay we shaped into pots. I began to watch Horemheb more closely, to listen to his words, to note the men he met in secret. He was no longer just my husband. He was a man with enemies, with weaknesses, with secrets that could be turned against him. The Nile whispered to me, its voice ancient and patient, promising that even stone could be worn down by time and will. Months passed, and my quiet rebellion grew. I spoke to the other women, not of anger, but of survival. We shared more than stories now, knowledge, plans, ways to protect ourselves and our children. We learned which herbs could soothe a fever, which words could sway a merchant, which paths led to freedom beyond the village. I began to teach Nebet and Kia, not just to weave or grind grain, but to read the stars, to know the river's moods, to trust their own strength. Horemheb noticed the change in me, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. But he could not see the fire beneath my calm. I was no longer the girl he married, no longer the silent shadow in his house. I was Merit, daughter of no one, but mother to two, and I would carve my own paths, even if it meant breaking the world he built around me. The day came when Horemheb's ambition overreached. He had woven himself into a plot, a scheme to gain favor by betraying a rival scribe to the priests. But his plan was sloppy, his greed blinding him to the danger. I saw my chance. In the quiet of night, I slipped into his study, my heart pounding as I touched his scrolls. There, in his own hand, was evidence of his treachery letters, names, promises of gold. I took them, not to destroy, but to hold, a weapon sharper than any blade. I went to the wife of the rival scribe, a woman named Anuket, whose eyes burned with the same fire I felt. Together, we brought the scrolls to the priests, not as accusers, but as humble women seeking justice. The priests, eager to protect their own power, acted swiftly. Horemheb was stripped of his titles, his name erased from the temple records, his pride shattered like a dropped jar. I stood by the Nile again. Years later, my daughters grown, their laughter now free, their eyes bright with dreams I never dared to hold. The river flowed on, unchanging, yet it had carried me here to a life I could not have imagined. I was no longer invisible, no longer bound. The women of the village looked to me now, not as a leader, but as a sister who had walked through fire and emerged whole. I thought of my mother, her warnings now a distant echo, replaced by a truth I had learned. To be a woman in this land was brutal, but it was also to be unbreakable. We were the river, the quiet force that shaped the world, even as it tried to shape us. And as I watched the water catch the light of the setting sun, I knew that our strength, though unseen, would outlast the stone of the pharaohs. The years after Horemheb's fall were not kind, but they were free. The Nile still flowed, its waters a mirror to my heart, calm on the surface, but churning with memories beneath. I moved with Nebet and Kia to a smaller house, one we built with our own hands, mud and straw packed tight against the world's cruelty. The village watched us, some with pity, others with envy, but I cared little for their whispers. My daughters were my sky, my stars, my reason to rise each morning when the weight of living pressed hard against my chest. Nebet, the elder, had her father's sharp mind, but none of his coldness. She learned to weave patterns so fine they rivaled the temple offerings. Kaya, my youngest, sang as she worked, her voice a thread of light in the dust-heavy air. Yet, freedom came at a cost. Without Horemheb's status, we were no longer shielded by his name. The village men circled like vultures, their offers of protection laced with demands I knew too well. I worked harder than ever, grinding grain until my shoulders screamed, trading papyrus mats for barley and oil. The market was a battlefield where every transaction was a test of wit and will. The merchants, with their sly smiles, thought me easy prey, a woman alone, with no man to speak for her. But I had learned from the river, from its quiet power, its ability to wear down stone. I haggled fiercely, my voice steady, my eyes unyielding. I taught Nebet and Kia to do the same, to stand tall, to let no one diminish them. We were not just women, we were a force, a current that could not be stopped. Still, the nights were long, and in the silence, I felt the ghosts of my past, my mother's warnings, Horemheb's betrayals, the dreams I had buried beneath years of labor. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, a stranger came to our door. He was no ordinary man, his linen was too fine, his sandals too clean for the dust of our village. He called himself Senenmut, a scribe from Memphis, sent by the priest to collect taxes. His eyes lingered on me, not with the hunger of the village men, but with a curiosity that felt dangerous in its own way. He spoke of new decrees, of heavier burdens on those without husbands or land. I felt the air grow thick, the weight of his words pressing against my throat. He offered leniency, a way to ease the taxes, but his tone carried an unspoken price. I sent him away, my voice cold as the desert night, but his shadow lingered, a reminder that freedom was fragile, a thing to be guarded with every breath. The village was changing. The priests of Amun grew richer, their temples gleaming while our homes crumbled. The men returned from wars or work in the quarries, their bodies broken, their tempers sharp. The women bore the brunt of it, bruises hidden beneath shawls, dreams silenced by fear. I saw it in Anuket's eyes. The woman who had helped me bring Horemheb down, she was older now. Her hands gnarled from years at the loom, but her spirit still burned. We met by the river, our voices low, planning not just survival, but resistance. We spoke of the old ways, of goddesses like Sekhmet, whose wrath could shake the heavens. We taught the younger women to hide grain, to barter in secret, to protect each other when the men's anger turned to blows. It was a quiet rebellion, woven into the fabric of our daily lives, invisible to those who saw us only as shadows. Nebet was growing into a woman, her beauty drawing eyes I wished I could shield her from. She was 17 now, the age I had been when I was given to Horemheb. I saw the village boys watching her, their smiles too much like their father's. I taught her to carry a knife, small and sharp, hidden in the folds of her dress. I taught her to trust no one, not fully, not even the gods. Kia, still young, listened wide-eyed, her songs quieter now, as if she sensed the storm gathering around us. I wanted to protect them, to build a world where they could laugh without fear. But the Nile's current was relentless, and so was our reality. Each night, I prayed to Isis, not for miracles, but for strength, for the courage to face what was coming. Senenmut returned, his visits more frequent, his offers more insistent. He spoke of a place in Memphis, a life of comfort for me and my daughters. If I would only yield, his words were honeyed, but I tasted the poison beneath. I knew what he wanted, not just my body, but my spirit, my defiance, the very thing that had kept me alive. I refused him again and again, until his patience frayed. One night, he came with men, their torches casting long shadows across our walls. They took our grain, our oil, everything we had stored for the lean months. Nebet clung to me, her knife trembling in her hand, while Kia wept silently. I stood before them, my voice steady, promising that the river would remember their cruelty. Senenmut laughed, but his eyes were uneasy, as if he sensed the weight of my words. The village rallied around us, not out of love, but out of fear. They saw what had happened to me and knew it could happen to them. Anuket organized the women, and we worked together, pooling what little we had, hiding what we could. We became ghosts in our own village, moving in the shadows, our voices carried by the wind. I taught Nebet and Kaya to read the few scrolls I had kept from Horemheb's study, scraps of knowledge that could be power. Nebet learned quickly, her mind a flame that burned brighter with each word. Kaya, though, preferred the songs, the stories, the myths that gave her hope. I let her sing, knowing that hope was as vital as bread in this brutal world. The turning point came when Senenmut overstepped. He accused Anuket's husband of theft, a lie meant to punish her for her defiance. The priests, eager to keep their power, sentenced him to the quarries, a death sentence disguised as labor. Anuket's grief was a fire that spread, igniting the women of the village. We gathered by the Nile, our voices rising not in song, but in anger. We spoke of our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, of the lives we had lost to men who saw us as nothing. I stood among them, my heart pounding, and told them of Senenmut's greed, of the scrolls I still held, the ones that could expose him. It was a risk, a spark that could burn us all, but we were tired of being ashes. We moved carefully, like the river carving its path. Anuket and I took the scrolls to a scribe who owed her a favor, a man who feared the priests but feared the truth more. He copied the scrolls, spreading word of Senenmut's corruption to those who could act. The priests, sensing a threat to their own power, turned on him. Senenmut was banished, his name struck from the records, his wealth seized. It was not justice, not fully, but it was a victory, small and sharp, like a blade in the dark. The village women looked at me differently now, their eyes holding not just respect, but hope. I felt it too, a fragile thing, like the first green shoots after the flood. I stood by the Nile once more, Nabat and Kia at my side, their hands in mine. The river was eternal, its waters carrying the stories of countless women before me. Women who had fought, who had endured. I was no longer just Merit, daughter of no one. I was a mother, a sister, a force. The world was still brutal, its edges sharp, its burdens heavy, but I had learned its secret. We were stronger than the stone, fiercer than the sun, deeper than the river itself. And as the stars lit the sky, I whispered to my daughters, not of gods or king, but of us, of women who bend but do not break, who carry the world in their hands and shape it with their will. The victory over Senenmut was a spark, but sparks fade quickly in a world of stone and sand. The Nile flowed on, its waters indifferent to our triumphs, its currents pulling us toward new struggles. I felt the weight of our small rebellion. The eyes of the village now turned toward me, expecting more, expecting miracles I could not promise. Nabat and Kia were my anchor, their presence a reminder that every step I took was for them, for a future where they could stand taller than I ever did. But the village was restless, the air thick with whispers of discontent. The priests, though they had cast out Senenmut, tightened their grip, demanding more grain, more labor, more offerings for their gods. We women worked until our hands bled, our bodies bent under the weight of their decrees. yet we were still seen as less than the dust beneath their sandals. I began to dream of the river at night, its voice louder now, speaking of paths beyond the village, beyond the temples and their unyielding gods. I saw my mother in those dreams, her face worn but fierce, urging me to move, to act, to break free. I woke with my heart racing, the taste of defiance sharp on my tongue. I gathered the women by the Nile's edge, under the cover of dawn, when the world was still half asleep. Anuket was there, her eyes hollow from grief but burning with resolve. We spoke of leaving, of finding a place where our daughters could grow without fear, where our labor would be our own. It was a dangerous dream, one that could cost us everything, but the alternative was to remain, to let the village grind us down until we were nothing but shadows. Nebet overheard us one morning, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. She was no longer a child, her mind as sharp as the reeds we cut, her heart as fierce as the desert wind. She asked to join us, to help plan, to carry the burden with me. I wanted to shield her, to keep her safe in the world I was trying to build. But I saw my own fire in her gaze. I nodded, my throat tight, and handed her a scroll, one of Horemheb's old maps, faded but still legible. It showed paths through the desert, routes to distant settlements where the priest's reach was weaker. Kaya, too young to understand the full weight of our plans, clung to me, her songs now laced with questions about the world beyond the river. The women worked in secret, hiding scraps of food, weaving baskets to carry what little we owned. We moved carefully, knowing that a single misstep could bring the priest's wrath. The men of the village, those who had not been broken by the quarries or the wars, grew suspicious. They noticed our quiet gatherings, the way our eyes no longer dropped in their presence. One night, a man named Tahotep, whose wife had joined our circle, confronted me. His voice was loud, his hands clenched, accusing me of stirring trouble, of defying the god's order. I stood before him, my heart pounding but my voice steady, and told him the gods cared little for our suffering. He raised his hand, but Anuket stepped between us, her presence a wall he could not cross. He left, muttering curses, but I knew he would not stay silent. The tension grew, a storm gathering over the village. The priests sent men to watch us, their shadows lingering at the edges of our lives. I felt their eyes on me as I worked, as I walked with my daughters, as I whispered plans with Anuket. We knew we could not stay much longer. But leaving was no simple thing. The desert was a cruel master, its sands swallowing those who ventured unprepared. We needed water, food, a guide who knew the paths. Anuket spoke of a man, a trader named Khonsu, who had traveled beyond the Nile, whose heart was not bound to the priests. I hesitated, remembering my mother's warnings about men and their promises. But we had no choice. I met him by the river, his eyes kind but wary, and offered him what little we had woven mats, dried fish, my mother's old amulet. He agreed, not for the payment, but for the chance to defy the priests who had taken so much from him. 2. Khonsu taught us the desert's secrets, how to read the stars, how to find water hidden beneath the sand, how to move without leaving tracks. Nebat soaked up his words, her mind a sponge, while Kia listened with wide eyes, turning his lessons into songs. We prepared in silence, our hearts heavy with the weight of what we were leaving behind. The village was our home, its mud brick walls holding the echoes of our mothers, our grandmothers, our pain. But it was also a cage, its bars forged by tradition and fear. I looked at my daughters, their faces lit by the firelight, and knew I could not let them inherit that cage. We would walk into the unknown, into the desert's embrace, and we would carry our strength with us. The night of our departure came too soon. The moon was a sliver, barely enough to light our way, but enough to hide us from prying eyes. We gathered at the river's edge, a small group of women, our children clinging to us, our baskets heavy with what little we could carry. Aniket led the way, her step sure, her grief transformed into purpose. Khonsu walked beside us, his voice low, guiding us through the reeds and into the desert's arms. Nebat held my hand, her grip tight, while Kia hummed softly, her song a thread of courage in the dark. The village faded behind us, its light swallowed by the night, and I felt a pang of loss, sharp and sudden. But I also felt the river's pull, its voice urging us forward, promising a new beginning. The desert was vast, its silence louder than any temple drum. The sand burned our feet, even through our sandals, and the air was dry, stealing the breath from our lungs. We walked for hours, then days, following Khonsu's lead, stopping only to sip water and rest in the shade of rare outcrops. The children grew tired, their voices quiet, but they did not complain. Nebat carried Kia when her legs faltered, her strength a mirror of my own. I watched them, my heart swelling with pride and fear, knowing that this journey was as much theirs as mine. Anuket whispered prayers to Sekhmet, asking for strength, for protection, and I joined her, my voice soft but fierce. The gods might not hear us, but we would hear each other. We reached a settlement after 7 days. A cluster of tents and low stone walls, far from the priest's reach. The people there were wary, their eyes hardened by the desert. But they welcomed us, offering water and bread. They were not bound by the same rules as our village, their women standing as equals, their voices heard. I saw Nebat's eyes light up, saw Kia's songs grow louder, and I knew we had found something precious. We built a new home, not of mud brick, but of trust, of shared labor, of stories told under the stars. I taught the women to weave, to read the scrolls, while they taught me to laugh again, to dream without fear. The Nile was far now, its voice a distant memory, but I carried it in my heart. I stood with my daughters, watching the desert sun set, its light painting the sand gold. We were not free of hardship. Life here was still brutal, still demanding, but we were free of chains. I looked at Nabet and Kia, their faces no longer shadowed by fear, and I knew we had done more than survive. We had reshaped our world, carved a path where none existed, and as the stars emerged, I whispered to them, not of gods or rivers, but of us, of women who walk through fire, who build from ashes, who carry the strength of the ages in their bones. The desert settlement became our sanctuary, but it was no paradise. The sun was as merciless here as it had been by the Nile, scorching the earth until it cracked like old skin. We built our lives slowly, weaving new patterns into the fabric of this place. The women of the settlement welcomed us, their hands rough like ours, their stories echoing our own. They spoke of escaping other villages, other masters, other gods who demanded more than they gave. I saw myself in their eyes, in the way they held their children close, in the way they worked without complaint but dreamed without limits. Nabet and Kia adapted quickly, their laughter mingling with the desert wind, their spirits lighter than I had ever seen. Yet, I carried a weight they could not see, a fear that this fragile peace would not last, that the world would find us again. Our new home was a cluster of tents and low stone walls, surrounded by dunes that shifted with every storm. We learned to plant barley in the narrow strips of fertile land, to trap small animals for food, to coax water from hidden springs. I taught the women to weave papyrus mats, my fingers guiding theirs as I had once guided Nebet's. In return, they taught me to read the desert's moods, to know when a storm was coming by the taste of the air. Nabet took to the work with a fierceness that made my heart ache with pride. She was no longer the girl who hid behind me. She was a woman, her hands steady, her mind sharp, her voice unafraid. Kia, still young, wove stories into her songs, tales of goddesses who walked the sands, of rivers that flowed beneath the earth. Her voice was our light, a reminder that beauty could survive even here. But the desert was not empty. Traders passed through, their caravans laden with goods and news from the Nile. They spoke of unrest in Thebes, of priests tightening their grip, of villages starving under new taxes. I listened, my heart heavy, knowing that the world we had fled was not done with us. One trader, a woman named Mutnajmet, lingered longer than the others. Her eyes were sharp, her voice low, carrying secrets she did not share with the men. She told me of a network, a hidden web of women stretching from Memphis to the Red Sea, women who passed messages, who hid runaways, who defied the priests in quiet ways. I felt a spark, the same fire that had burned when I stood against Horemheb, against Senenmut. I wanted to join them, to be part of something larger. But I hesitated, afraid of what it might cost my daughters. Mutnajmet saw my fear, my strength, my heart laid bare. She sat with me one night, under a sky so vast it seemed to swallow the world. She spoke of her own escape, of a husband who had beaten her, of a village that had turned its back. She had walked the desert alone, her body bruised but her spirit unbroken, until she found this network of women, this sisterhood that gave her purpose. Her words stirred something in me, a longing to do more than survive, to fight for others as I had fought for myself. I looked at Nebet, sleeping nearby, her face peaceful, and Kia curled against her, humming softly in her dream. I knew I could not stay silent, not when their future depended on a world we could shape together. I joined Mutnajmet's network, my steps cautious but my resolve firm. We met in secret, under the guise of weaving or trading, our voices low as we planned. We hid women who fled their villages, their bodies marked by cruelty, their eyes bright with hope. We smuggled food to those who needed it, passed messages to warn of the priest's men, shared knowledge that could free us from their chains. Nebet joined me, her youth no barrier to her courage. She learned to write, her hand steady as she copied messages on scraps of papyrus, her mind quick to memorize roots and names. Kia, too young to join fully, watched us with wide eyes, her songs now carrying the weight of our secrets. I saw my mother in them, her warnings transformed into action, her fear into fire. The work was dangerous, each step a dance with death. The priest's men roamed the desert, their eyes sharp, their hands quick to punish. We learned to move like shadows, to leave no trace, to trust only those whose hearts we knew. One night, a woman named Tuya came to us, her face bruised, her voice trembling. She had fled a village near Memphis, where the priests had taken her children as offerings to the temple, claiming they were chosen by Amun. Her pain was a knife in my chest, a reminder of what I fought for. We hid her in our settlement, taught her to weave, to heal, to live again. But her story spread, a spark that ignited anger in the women around us. We were no longer just surviving, we were fighting, our voices rising like the desert wind. The priests heard of us, though they did not know our names. They sent men to the settlement, their sandals kicking up dust, their voices loud with threats. They demanded tribute, loyalty, the names of those who defied them. I stood before them, my heart pounding but my face calm, and spoke of peace, of obedience, while my hands hid the scrolls that could destroy them. Nebet stood beside me, her eyes fierce, her knife hidden in her dress. Kia sang softly, her voice a distraction, a shield for our secrets. The men left, unsatisfied but empty-handed, their threats hanging in the air like a storm. I knew they would return, and I knew we could not hide forever. The desert was vast, but not vast enough to shield us from their reach. We prepared for the worst, our hands busy, our hearts heavy. But Nojmet brought news of a larger plan, a rebellion brewing in the south, where women and men alike were rising against the priests. She asked me to join them, to bring my daughters, to fight for a world where no woman would kneel. I hesitated, my love for Nebet and Kia warring with my need to act. Nebet made the choice for me, her voice steady as she said she would fight, not just for us, but for every woman who had been silenced. Kia, too, nodded, her songs now anthems of defiance. I looked at them, my heart breaking and swelling at once, and agreed. We would go south, to the heart of the rebellion, to a future we could not see, but would build with our own hands. The journey was long, the desert unrelenting. We walked under the stars, our steps guided by Nojmet's knowledge, our hearts by our shared resolve. Nebet carried the scrolls, her hand steady, while Kia sang to keep our spirits high. The rebellion was a whisper when we arrived, a gathering of shadows in a hidden valley. Women and men stood together, their faces worn but fierce, their voices speaking of freedom, of a world where the gods served the people, not the priests. I saw my mother's face in every woman there, my daughter's future in every child. We were not just fighting for ourselves, but for those who came before, those who would come after. I stood with Nebet and Kia, the desert wind carrying our voices, our stories, our strength. The rebellion was only beginning, its outcome uncertain, but I felt no fear. We were the river, the fire, the stone that would not break. We were women, our lives brutal, our hearts unbreakable, our will a force that could reshape the world. And as the stars burned above, I whispered to my daughters, not of victory, but of us, of the women who carry the past in their bone, the future in their hands, and the power to change everything. The valley of the rebellion was a place of shadows and fire, hidden deep in the desert where the dunes rose like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of dust and hope, a strange mix that clung to my skin as we settled among the rebels. They were a ragged group, women with hands calloused from labor, men with scars from wars they did not choose, children whose eyes held too much knowing for their years. I saw myself in them, in the way they moved with purpose despite their exhaustion, in the way they whispered dreams of a world unbowed by priests or kings. Nebet and Kia stayed close, their presence my anchor, their courage my flame. The valley was not safe, but it was alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of defiance, and for the first time, I felt I was part of something greater than my own survival. We worked from dawn to dusk, building shelters from woven reeds and stone, digging shallow wells to catch the rare water that seeped through the earth. Nebet took to the tasks with a fierceness that made the older women nod in approval, her hands quick as she tied knots or shaped clay. Kia, still a child in so many ways, sang as she carried water, her voice weaving through the camp like a thread of light. The rebels listened, their faces softening, and I saw how her songs gave them strength, a reminder of what we fought for. But the work was grueling, the desert unforgiving, and every night I lay awake, my mind racing with fears I could not name. The priests would find us. I knew their reach as long as the Nile itself, their anger as sharp as a blade. The leader of the rebellion was a woman named Iset, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes like the desert at noon, bright and unyielding. She had been a priestess once, trained in the temples of Memphis, but she had turned her back on the gods when she saw their words twisted to chain her people. Her voice carried the weight of years, of loss, but also of hope. And when she spoke, the camp fell silent. She told us of a plan, not just to hide, but to strike to disrupt the priests' trade routes, to free those bound to their temples, to show the world that we were not shadows, but fire. I listened, my heart pounding, knowing that this path would demand everything, perhaps even my daughters' lives. Yet, when I looked at Nebet, her eyes met mine, steady and sure, and I knew she was ready. As I was, we trained in secret, learning to move silently, to wield sticks and stones as weapons, to read the desert's signs. Nebet was quick, her body lithe, her mind sharper than any blade. She learned to track, to hide, to strike, her movements a dance of defiance. Kaya, too young for battle, learned to watch, to listen, to carry messages hidden in her songs. I taught them both to trust their instincts, to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. The other women trained beside us, their hands no longer just for weaving or grinding grain, but for fighting, for building a future. We were not warriors in the way of men, with bronze swords and chariots, but we were fierce, our strength born from years of enduring, of carrying burdens no one else would bear. Our first strike came under a moonless sky, the desert swallowing our steps as we moved toward a caravan bound for Thebes. It carried grain, gold, and slaves, men and women bound for the temples, their lives no longer their own. Iset led us, her voice low but steady. guiding us through the dunes. Nebat was at my side, her breath quick, her knife tucked into her belt. Kia stayed behind, her songs a beacon for those who remained in the camp. We struck swiftly, cutting ropes, scattering guards, freeing those who had been chained. The air was thick with dust and shouts, but we moved as one, our hands steady, our hearts alight. I saw a woman, her face bruised, her eyes wide with fear, and I cut her bond, whispering that she was free. She clung to me, her tears hot against my skin, and I felt the weight of her freedom, heavy and precious. The priest's men retaliated, their anger a storm that swept through the desert. They burned a nearby settlement, leaving only ash and grief. We heard the news from a trader, his voice trembling as he spoke of children lost, of homes reduced to nothing. The camp was silent that night, the weight of our actions pressing against us. I held Nebat and Kia close, their warmth a shield against the cold fear in my chest. Iset called us together, her voice steady but her eyes heavy with sorrow. She spoke of sacrifice, of the cost of freedom, of the need to keep fighting. Some wanted to flee, to hide deeper in the desert, but I saw Nebat's jaw tighten, her resolve unbroken. She spoke, her voice clear, saying we could not stop, not when so many still suffered. I felt pride and terror, knowing she was my daughter, but also her own woman. Fierce and unyielding, we struck again, bolder this time, targeting a temple outpost near the Nile. It was a risk, bringing us closer to the priest's heart. But Iset believed it would send a message. We moved at dawn, when the light was soft but the guards were weary. Nebat led a small group, her steps silent, her eyes sharp. I watched her, my heart in my throat, knowing I could not protect her now. The outpost fell quickly, its stores of grain and oil ours, its prisoners free, but one of our own. A young woman named Merit was caught, her screams echoing as they dragged her away. We could not save her, and the failure cut deeper than any blade. I held Nebat that night, her body shaking with rage and grief, and I knew this war would mark us all, even if we won. The rebellion grew, its whispers spreading like fire through dry reeds. More joined us, women fleeing villages, men tired of bending to the priests, children who had known nothing but hunger. We were no longer just a camp, but a movement, our voices rising louder, our actions bolder. Iset taught us to write, to carve our stories into stone, so that even if we fell, our truth would remain. Nebat took to it with a hunger, her hand steady as she etched words of defiance, of hope. Kia's songs became anthems, sung by those who had never known her. Their words carried on the wind. I saw my mother in every mark we made, her warnings now a call to action, her pain a fire that fueled us. The priests sent an army, their chariots cutting through the desert like a blade through flesh. We were ready, our traps set, our hearts steeled. The battle was chaos, dust and blood and screams, but we fought as one, our strength drawn from years of endurance, of carrying the world on our backs. Nebet was a shadow, slipping through the fray, her knife finding those who sought to chain us. Kia, hidden in the camp, sang, her voice a thread that held us together. I fought beside Iset, my hands no longer just for weaving, but for breaking the chains of those who would bind us. We drove them back, their chariots broken, their men fleeing, but the cost was heavy, friends lost, blood staining the sand. I stood in the aftermath, Nebet and Kaya at my side, the desert quiet but for the wind. We had won, but the war was not over. The priests would come again, their power vast, their anger endless. Yet, I looked at my daughters, at the women and men around me, and I knew we were not done. We were the river, carving our path through stone. We were the fire, burning through the darkness. We were women, our lives brutal, our hearts fierce, our will a force that could not be stopped. And as the stars rose, I whispered to Nebet and Kia, not of peace, but of us, of the women who fight, who bleed, who rise, and who will never kneel again. A storm that swept through the desert like a plague. They came with torches and spears, their chariots tearing through the dunes, leaving trails of fire and fear. The settlement we had raided was only the beginning. They hunted us now, their eyes sharp, their intent clear. We scattered into the valley, hiding in caves and crevices, our breaths held as the sound of their wheels echoed closer. I clutched Nebet and Kia, their bodies trembling against mine, their courage unshaken, but their fear as real as my own. The rebels moved like ghosts, our training saving us, but the cost was heavy. 2 of our own were taken, their screams cutting through the night, a sound I could not unhear. Iset's face was stone, but her eyes betrayed her grief, a mirror of my own heart's ache. We regrouped in the deepest part of the valley, where the rocks formed a natural fortress, shielding us from the world above. The air was heavy with dust and despair, but Iset's voice cut through it, steady as the stars. She spoke of resilience, of the need to keep moving, to keep fighting. Even as the priest's shadow loomed larger, Nebet listened, her jaw tight, her hands clenched around the knife she now carried openly. Kia, too young for such weight, clung to me, her song silent for the first time, her eyes searching mine for answers I didn't have. I held them both, my heart a battleground of love and fear. knowing that every choice I made could be their salvation or their doom. The rebels looked to me now, not as a leader, but as a mother, a woman who had faced the priests and lived, and I felt the weight of their hope, heavier than any water jar I had ever carried. We planned our next move with care, our hands busy, our voices low. The priests' caravans were their lifeblood, carrying grain and gold to their temples, and we would bleed them dry. I mapped out a new target, a route through a narrow pass where the dunes rose high. Perfect for an ambush, Nebet volunteered, her voice steady, her eyes burning with the fire I both feared and admired. I wanted to hold her back, to keep her safe. But I saw my mother in her, my own defiance reflected in her gaze. Kia, though, I kept close. Her role to stay with the children, to sing courage into their hearts. We prepared in silence, weaving nets to trap the guards, sharpening sticks into spears, our hands steady despite the storm in our chests. The ambush was swift, a blur of sand and shadow. We struck at dusk, when the light was soft and the guards' eyes were heavy. Nebet moved like a desert wind, silent and fierce, cutting ropes and freeing captives while Iset led the charge against the guards. I fought beside them, my hands no longer just for weaving or grinding, but for breaking chains, for carving freedom from the priests' greed. The captives, men and women with hollow eyes, ran to us, their gratitude a weight we carried gladly. But victory came at a cost, blood stained the sand. And one of our own, a woman named Sati, fell, her body still as the dunes. Nebet's hands shook as she closed Sati's eyes, and I saw the girl she had been flicker beneath the woman she was becoming. The priest's retaliation was merciless. They burned another settlement, their fires visible even from our valley, a warning written in ash and flame. The rebels gathered, our numbers growing as more fled to us, their stories of loss fueling our resolve. Iset spoke of a larger plan, a strike at the heart of Thebes itself, where the priest's power was strongest. It was a dream so bold it bordered on madness, but her voice made it real, made us believe we could topple stone with our will. Nebet was the first to agree, her voice ringing clear, her words a promise to those we had lost. Kia, her songs returning, wove their names into her melodies, Sati, Merit, and others keeping their spirits alive. I felt my mother's presence, her warnings now a call to action, her pain a fire that burned in us all. We trained harder, our bodies lean, our hearts fierce. Nebet learned to lead, her youth no barrier to her strength, her mind quick to see patterns in the desert, in the priest's movements. Kaya grew too, her songs no longer just for comfort, but for strategy, her words carrying messages hidden in their rhythm. I taught them both to read the stars, to trust the desert's silence, to carry their strength like a shield. The women around us became sisters, their hands linked, their voices one. We were no longer just rebels, we were a tide, rising against the stone of the priest's world, ready to carve a new path. Iset named me her second, a role I did not seek but could not refuse. For I saw my daughters in every face, my mother in every story. The strike on Thebes began with whispers, our network spreading word to those still bound by the Nile. We moved in small groups, slipping through the desert, our steps silent, our hearts loud. Nebet led a group to the river's edge, her knife gleaming, her eyes sharp as she cut through the priest's supply lines. Kia stayed with me, her songs a signal to those waiting in the shadows. The city was alive with festival lights, the air thick with incense and arrogance. But we were the shadow beneath it all, the current that would break their power. We struck at midnight, freeing prisoners, burning storehouses, our hands swift, our hearts alight. The priest's guards fell before us, their bronze no match for our fire. The city trembled, its people waking to the sound of our defiance. We did not stay to fight, but fled back to the desert, our steps hidden by the wind. The priest's anger followed, their armies scouring the sands, but we were ghosts, our valley a secret they could not find. Nebet returned, her face streaked with dust, her eyes bright with triumph and grief. She had seen death, had dealt it, and I held her, knowing the weight she carried. Kia sang, her voice softer now, weaving our victory into a story that would outlast us. The rebels celebrated, but Iset's eyes were heavy, knowing the priests would not rest, that our fight was far from over. We rebuilt in the valley, our hands never still, our hearts never quiet. More came to us, their stories a litany of pain and hope. Women who had lost husbands, children who had lost mothers, men who had lost faith in the gods. We welcomed them, taught them, loved them. Nebet became a teacher, her scrolls no longer just for messages, but for stories, for truths we would not let die. Kia's songs grew stronger, carrying our history, our defiance, to every corner of the camp. Iset and I planned, our minds bent on a future where no one would kneel, where the Nile would flow for all, not just the priests. I stood with my daughters, the desert wind cool against my skin, the stars a canopy above. The world was still brutal, its edges sharp, its burdens heavy. But we were not broken. We were the river, the fire, the stone that would not yield. We were women, our lives a battle, our hearts a fortress, our will a force that could reshape the earth. And as the dawn broke, I whispered to Nebet and Kia, not of gods or kings, but of us, of the women who rise from ash, who carve their names in the sand, who carry the strength of the ages in their souls. The valley held us like a mother, its rocky embrace both shelter and cage. We had struck at Thebes, left our mark on the priest's pride, but their shadow grew longer, their anger a tide that threatened to drown us. The desert was no longer a refuge, it was a battlefield. Its sands stained with the blood of those we lost and those we freed. I woke each morning to the sound of Kia's songs, softer now, woven with the names of the fallen Sati, Meret, and others whose faces haunted my dreams. Nabat was different, her eyes harder, her hands always moving, as if stillness would let the grief catch her. I watched her, my heart torn between pride and fear, knowing she was no longer just my daughter but a warrior, her spirit as fierce as the desert sun. We strengthened our defenses, piling stones higher, digging deeper, hiding places. The rebels worked without rest, our hands raw, our bodies lean from hunger and effort. Iset's voice was our guide, steady but strained, her gray hair a banner of endurance. She spoke of a new plan, bolder than before, to disrupt the priest's festival of Opet, when all of Thebes gathered to honor Amun. When their power was at its peak, it was a risk that could break us, but also a chance to show the world that we were not shadows, not dust, but a force that could shake the foundations of their stone temples. I felt the weight of her words, heavy as the water jars I once carried, and I knew we had no choice but to move forward. Nebat planned with Iset, her mind sharp, mapping the city's streets from memory and the scrolls we had stolen. She spoke of alleys where we could hide, of moments when the crowds would mask our movements. I listened, my chest tight, wishing I could shield her from this path. But knowing she had chosen it as surely as I had, Kia, too young for the strike, took on a new role. Her songs became signals, their rhythms a code that only we understood. She sang of the river, of freedom, but beneath her words were instructions, warnings, plans that kept us alive. I taught her to hide her fear, to let her voice carry strength. Even when her hands trembled, she was my light, my hope, and I clung to her as tightly as I clung to our cause. The women of the camp prepared in silence, our hands weaving nets, sharpening stones, crafting disguises from stolen linen. We were not just rebels now, but a sisterhood, our hearts bound by shared pain and shared dreams. Anuket, her grief for her husband, a quiet fire, taught us to move as one, to fight as one. Mutnajmet, the trader who had brought me into this network, brought news from the Nile, whispers of others rising, of villages stirring, of a tide turning against the priest. It was a spark, fragile but bright, and we fed it with our resolve. I looked at my daughters, at the women around me, and saw my mother's face. Her warnings now a call to arms. Her pain a strength that carried us forward. The night of Opet came, the air thick with incense and the hum of a city alive with worship. We slipped into Thebes like shadows, our faces hidden beneath shawls, our knives tucked close. Nebet led a group to the temple's edge, her step silent, her eyes sharp as she cut through the ropes binding the priest's offerings grain. Gold lives stolen from villages like ours. I moved with Iset, my heart pounding, my hands steady as we set fires in the storehouses. The flames a signal to those still bound that freedom was possible. Kia's voice reached us from a distance, her song rising above the festival's noise, guiding us through the chaos. The city woke to our defiance, its streets alive with shouts, its air heavy with smoke. The priest's guards were swift, their bronze blades gleaming in the firelight. We fought, not with strength, but with cunning, our nets trapping their feet, our stones finding their hands. Nebet was a blur, her knife a whisper of death, her courage a fire that burned brighter than the flames we set. I saw her save a child, pulling her from a guard's grasp, and my heart swelled even as it broke. The cost was high, 3 of our own fell, their blood mixing with the sand, their names added to Kia's songs. We fled before dawn, our steps hidden by the festival's chaos, our hearts heavy with loss but alight with triumph. The priest's festival was broken, their power shaken, their god's name tarnished by our hands. We returned to the valley, our bodies bruised, our spirits raw. The rebels gathered around fires, their faces lit with pride and grief. Iset spoke, her voice softer now, but no less fierce. She told us we had done what no one thought possible, that our names, though unwritten, would live in the stories of those we freed. Nebet stood beside her, her eyes older now, her hands stained with the dust of battle. Kia sang, her voice a thread of light, weaving our losses into a tapestry of hope. I held them both, my daughters, my warriors, knowing that this fight had changed us forever. The desert was no longer just our refuge, it was our strength, its sands holding the echoes of our defiance. The priests did not rest. Their armies came closer, their spies slipping through the dunes, their threats carried on the wind. We knew our valley was no longer safe, that we would have to move again, deeper into the desert, where even their chariots could not follow. Iset planned our escape, her mind sharp despite her exhaustion, her heart unbroken despite her grief. Nebet helped, her scrolls now maps of survival, her words a guide for those who would follow. Kia's songs became our beacon, their melodies carrying us through the long nights of planning, of packing, of saying goodbye to the valley that had held us. We were not fleeing, but moving toward something new, a future we would build with our own hands. The journey was brutal. The desert's heat, a weight that pressed against our bones. We walked under the stars, our steps slow but sure, our baskets heavy with what little we could carry. Nebet led the way, her eyes scanning the horizon, her knife always ready. Kia sung, her voice softer now, but no less powerful, keeping the children's spirits high, keeping our hearts bound together. Anuket and Mutnojmet walked beside me, their presence a reminder that we were not alone, that our sisterhood was our strength. The desert tested us, its sands swallowing our tears, its silence swallowing our fears. But we did not break. We were the river, flowing where no water should, carving a path where none existed. We found a new valley, smaller, hidden by cliffs that rose like guardians. It was not the Nile, not the home we had known, but it was ours. We built again, our hands shaping shelters, our hearts shaping hope. Nebet taught the children to read, her scrolls a legacy of our fight. Kia sang, her voice carrying our story to the stars. I stood with them, the desert wind soft against my skin, the sky endless above. The world was still brutal, its chains heavy, its God silent. But we were women, our lives a fire, our hearts a river, our will a force that could not be stopped. And as the dawn broke, I whispered to my daughters, not of safety, but of us, of the women who burn, who float, who rise, and who will never be silenced. The new valley was a cradle of stone, its cliffs rising sharp against the sky, guarding us from the world we had left behind. The air was dry, the ground hard, but it was ours, a place carved by our hands. Our will, our refusal to kneel. We built shelters from the sparse reeds and rocks, our fingers bleeding as we wove and stacked. But each structure was a defiance, a promise that we would not be broken. Nebet worked beside me, her hands steady, her eyes carrying a fire that both warmed and frightened me. She was no longer the girl who clung to my side. She was a woman, her strength a mirror of my own, her dreams bolder than I had ever dared. Kia, still young but growing fast, sang as she carried water, her voice a thread of hope that wove us together, her songs now carrying the weight of our losses and our victories. The rebels were fewer now, our numbers worn by battle and the desert's cruelty, but our resolve was stronger, forged in the fires of Thebes and the sands of our flight. Iset, her gray hair now a crown of wisdom, gathered us each evening, her voice a beacon in the growing dark. She spoke of a new goal, not just to survive, but to spread our rebellion, to light fires in every village along the Nile, to show the people that the priest's power was not eternal. Her words were a spark, igniting something deep within me. A longing to see my daughters live in a world where their voices mattered, where their hands shaped more than just survival. Nebet nodded, her jaw tight, while Kia's songs grew fiercer, her melodies a call to arms. We sent messengers, women who moved like shadows, their steps silent, their hearts loud. Mutnajmet led them, her trader's knowledge guiding them through the desert to villages where the priest's grip was tightest. They carried scrolls, not of war, but of hope, stories of our strikes, of the captives we freed, of the fires we set in Thebes. Nebet wrote these scrolls, her hand steady, her words sharp as a blade. She poured her heart into them, her dreams of a world where no woman would bow, where no child would fear. I watched her, my chest aching with pride and fear, knowing that each message she wrote was a risk, a thread that could lead the priest to us. Kia, too, played her part, her songs carrying hidden messages, her voice a signal that traveled where scrolls could not. The villages began to stir, their whispers reaching us like ripples on the Nile. Women hid grain. Men refused to march for the priests. Children carried our stories in their laughter. The priests felt the shift, their anger a storm that brewed beyond the horizon. They sent spies, their eyes sharp, their hands quick to punish. One night, a messenger returned, her face bruised, her voice trembling. She spoke of a village razed, its people scattered, its women taken to the temples as punishment. Her words were a knife in my heart, a reminder of the cost of our defiance. Iset's eyes darkened, but she did not falter. She spoke of sacrifice, of the need to keep moving, to keep fighting, even as the world tried to crush us. Nebet took the news hardest, her hands shaking as she wrote new scrolls, her words now a plea for others to join us, to rise before the priests could silence them. I saw the weight she carried, the same weight I had borne for years, and I wanted to shield her, to take it from her. But I knew I could not. She was no longer mine to protect. She was a force, a fire that burned brighter than my own. Kia, sensing her sister's pain, sang softer now, her songs a balm, a reminder that we fought for love as much as for freedom. I held them both, my daughters, my warriors, and felt the river in my veins, its current urging us forward, its voice promising that we could endure. The priests struck back, their armies moving closer, their chariots cutting through the desert like a blade through flesh. We prepared for battle, our hands sharpening stones, our hearts steeling against fear. Iset trained us, her voice sharp, her movements precise, teaching us to fight not with strength, but with cunning. Nebet led a group, her eyes fierce, her knife a part of her now, as natural as her breath. Kaya stayed with the children, her songs a shield, her voice a light in the dark. I fought beside Iset, my hands no longer just for weaving or carrying, but for breaking, for building, for shaping a world where my daughters could stand tall. The battle was fierce, the sand red with blood, but we held our ground. Our valley a fortress, our will a wall. We drove them back, but the cost was heavy. Anuket fell, her body still, her fire extinguished. Iset wept, her tears a rare crack in her strength. And I felt my own heart break, not just for Anuket, but for all we had lost. Nebet closed Anuket's eyes, her hands steady despite her grief. And Kia sang her name, weaving it into the tapestry of our story. The rebels gathered, our numbers smaller, but our resolve unbroken. Iset spoke of moving again, deeper into the desert, to a place where the priest's reach was weaker. Nebet agreed, her voice steady, her scrolls now maps of a new path. Kia's songs became our guide, their melodies a promise of hope in a world that offered none. The journey was long, the desert a crucible that tested our souls. We walked under the stars, our steps slow, our burdens heavy. Nebet led, her eyes scanning the horizon, her heart carrying the weight of those we had lost. Kia sang, her voice a thread that held us together, her songs now a history of our fight, a legacy for those who would follow. Mutnojmet walked beside me, her trader's wisdom guiding us, her presence a reminder that we were not alone. The desert was cruel, its heat a fire, its silence a weight, but we were fiercer, our hearts a river that could not be stopped. We found a new home, a narrow valley hidden by cliffs, its stones warm with the promise of safety. We built again, our hands shaping shelters, our hearts shaping dreams. Nebet taught the children to write, her scrolls a record of our defiance, a promise that our story would not die. Kia sang, her voice carrying our pain, our hope, our strength to the stars. Iset grew quieter, her gray hair thinner now, but her eyes still burned. Her voice still called us to fight. I stood with my daughters, the desert wind soft against my skin, the cliffs rising like guardians around us. The world was still brutal, its chains heavy, its gods indifferent. But we were women, our lives afire, our hearts a tide, our will a force that could not be silenced. I looked at Nebet and Kia, their faces lit by the firelight, their eyes carrying the weight of our fight, the promise of our future. We were not just rebels, we were the river, flowing through stone, carving a path where none existed. We were the fire, burning through the dark, lighting a way for those who would follow. And as the stars burned above, I whispered to my daughters, not of peace, but of us, of the women who endure, who fight, who rise and who carry the strength of the ages in their hearts, a strength that will outlast the stone of the pharaohs. The new valley was our refuge, but it was no sanctuary. The cliffs that hid us also trapped us, their shadows a constant reminder that safety was fleeting in a world ruled by stone and greed. We built with what little we had: reeds, rocks, the stubborn will that had carried us this far. Nibet's hands were never still, her fingers weaving shelters, her eyes scanning the horizon for threats. She had grown into a woman I barely recognized, her laughter replaced by a quiet strength, her dreams sharpened into purpose. Kia, still a child in her heart, sang to keep the darkness at bay, her voice weaving our pain into hope, her songs a thread that bound us to each other. I watched them, my daughters, my fire, and felt the weight of their futures. Heavier than any burden I had carried by the Nile, Iset's health was fading, her body worn by years of fighting, her gray hair thin as the desert grass. Yet her eyes still burned, her voice still called us to rise. She gathered us under the stars, her words slower now, but no less fierce. She spoke of a final stand, not in the desert, but in the heart of Memphis, where the priest's power was rooted, where the Nile's wealth fed their greed. It was a plan that could end us, but also one that could break their hold forever. Nebet listened, her hands clenched, her resolve a mirror of Iset's. Kia's songs grew quiet, her eyes wide with the weight of what was coming. I felt my mother's warnings in my bones, but they were no longer a cage, they were a fire, urging me to act, to protect, to fight. We prepared with a fierceness born of desperation. Mutnajmet's network brought us weapons, stolen bronze, sharpened stones, bows crafted from desert wood. Nebet trained the younger women, her voice steady, teaching them to aim, to strike, to move like shadows. Kia, too young for battle, took on a new role. Her songs became maps, their rhythms guiding our messengers through the desert, their words hiding plans from prying ears. I worked beside Iset, my hand shaping arrows, my heart shaping courage. The women around us were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, their hands calloused not just from labor, but from defiance. We were a sisterhood, bound by blood and fire, our hearts beating as one. The journey to Memphis was a crucible, the desert testing us with every step. The sun burned our skin, the sand stole our breath, but we moved forward, our eyes fixed on the horizon. Nebet led a group, her knife a constant companion, her scrolls hidden in her belt, carrying our story, our truth. Kia walked beside me, her song softer now, but no less powerful, keeping the children's spirits high, keeping our resolve unbroken. Mutnajmet guided us, her trader's knowledge a light in the dark, her stories of other rebellions a spark that kept us moving. The desert was cruel, its silence a weight, but we were fiercer, our hearts a river that flowed where no water should. We reached Memphis at dawn, the city sprawling along the Nile, its temples gleaming with stolen wealth. The air was thick with incense, the streets alive with merchants and priests, their arrogance a blade that cut us deeper than any bronze. We slipped in like shadows, our faces hidden, our knives closed. Nabat led a group to the temple's storehouses, her steps silent, her eyes sharp as she cut through the ropes binding the priest's grain. I moved with Iset, our hands steady as we set fires, the flames a signal to the city that their gods were not untouchable. Kia's voice reached us, her song rising above the city's noise, guiding our movements, shielding our plans. The priest's guards were ready, their bronze gleaming, their numbers vast. We fought, not with strength, but with cunning, our nets trapping their feet, our arrows finding their hearts. Nebet was a storm, her knife a flash of defiance, her courage a fire that burned brighter than the flames we set. I saw her save a woman, pulling her from a guard's grasp, and my heart broke with pride and fear. The cost was heavy, 5 of our own fell, their blood staining the city's stones, their names etched in Kia's songs. Iset fought beside me, her body frail but her spirit fierce, her voice a cry that rallied us. We did not win the city, but we wounded it, our fires burning through their wealth, our defiance shaking their power. We fled before the sun rose, our steps hidden by the chaos we had sown. The desert swallowed us, its sands a shield, but the priest's anger followed, their armies scouring the land. We returned to our valley, our bodies broken, our hearts raw. Iset collapsed, her breath shallow, her eyes still burning with the fire of our cause. Nabet tended to her, her hands gentle but her face hard, knowing we could not save her. Kia sang, her voice a thread of light, weaving Iset's name into our story, promising that her strength would live on. The rebels gathered, our numbers smaller, our grief heavier, but our resolve unbroken. We buried Iset under the stars, her body laid in the sand, her spirit free at last. Nebet spoke, her voice steady, promising to carry Iset's dream, to fight until no woman knelt, no child feared. Kia sang, her song a vow, a legacy that would outlast us all. I stood with them, my daughters, my warriors, and felt the river in my veins, its current stronger now, its voice louder. We were not done. The priests would come, their chariots would roll, but we would meet them, our hands ready, our hearts fierce. The valley was our home, but the fight was our life, and we would not yield. We rebuilt, our hands shaping shelters, our hearts shaping hope. Nebet led now, her youth no barrier, her scrolls a record of our defiance, a map for those who would follow. Kia's songs grew stronger, carrying our story to the stars, to the villages, to the hearts of those still bound. Mutnajmet stayed with us, her trader's wisdom a guide, her presence a reminder that we were not alone. The desert was brutal, its heat a fire, its silence a weight, but we were fiercer, our hearts a tide that could not be stopped. We were women, our lives a battle, our will a force that could reshape the world. I stood with Nebet and Kia, the desert wind soft against my skin, the stars a canopy above. The world was still brutal, its chains heavy, its gods silent. But we were not. We were the river, flowing through stone, the fire burning through the dark, the women who would not break. And as the dawn broke, I whispered to my daughters, not of victory, but of us, of the women who fight, who bleed, who rise, and who carry the strength of the ages in their souls, a strength that will outlast the temples of the priests. The valley was our fortress, its cliffs a shield against the world. But we knew the priest would come. Their anger was a storm, gathering beyond the dunes, their chariots a promise of death. We had struck at Memphis, burned their wealth, freed their captives, and now their pride demanded our blood. Nebet led us now, her youth a flame that burned through our weariness, her scrolls a map of defiance. Kia's songs were our heartbeat, their melodies carrying our story, our strength. To every corner of the desert, I stood with them, my daughters, my soul, and felt the river in my veins, its current fierce, its voice a vow that we would not break. The world was brutal, but we were fiercer, our hearts a fire that could not be quenched. We prepared for the end, our hands sharpening stones, weaving nets, building traps in the valley's narrow passes. Nebet trained the rebels, her voice steady, her eyes sharp, teaching them to fight as she had fought, silent, swift, unyielding. Kia, no longer a child, took her place among us. Her songs now war cries, their rhythms a signal for our movements. Mutnajmet brought news from the Nile villages rising, women hiding their grain, men refusing the priest's call. Our rebellion had spread, a fire that leaped from heart to heart, and though we were few, we were not alone. I felt my mother's presence, her warnings now a song of strength, her pain a fuel that burned in us all. The priests came at dawn, their chariots a thunder that shook the earth, their bronze gleaming in the rising sun. We met them in the valley's mouth, our traps snapping, our arrows flying, our hands steady despite the fear in our chests. Nabat was a shadow, slipping through the fray, her knife a flash of defiance, her courage a beacon for us all. Kia sang, her voice rising above the chaos, guiding our movements, holding us together. I fought beside them, my hands no longer just for weaving or carrying, but for breaking, for building, for shaping a world where my daughters could stand free. The battle was fierce, the sand red with blood, the air thick with dust and screams. We held our ground, our valley a fortress, our will a wall. The priests' men fell, their chariots broken, their bronze no match for our fire. But the cost was heavy, too many of our own lay still, their names added to Kia's songs, their spirits carried on the wind. Nebat fought on, her body bruised, her eyes fierce, her heart unbroken. Kia's voice never faltered, her songs a thread that wove our losses into hope. I saw a guard raise his blade against Nebat, and I moved without thought, my stone finding his chest, my heart stopping until I saw her rise. We were not just fighting for freedom, but for each other, for the love that bound us, for the future we would not let die. The priest retreated, their numbers thinned, their pride shattered. We did not chase them, our strength spent, our hearts heavy with grief. The valley was quiet, the sand stained, the cliffs bearing witness to our stand. Nebat gathered the rebels, her voice steady, speaking of those we had lost, of the world we would build in their name. Kia sang, her song a vow, a legacy that would outlast the stone of the pharaohs. I held them both, my daughters, my warriors, and felt the river slow in my veins, its current softer now, its voice a whisper of peace. We had not won the war, but we had won this moment, this breath, this chance to dream. We rebuilt, our hands shaping shelters, our hearts shaping hope. Nabat led with a wisdom beyond her years, her scrolls a record of our fight, a guide for those who would follow. Kia's songs grew stronger, carrying our story to the stars, to the villages, to the hearts of those still bound. Mut Nujmat stayed with us, her trader's wisdom a light, her presence a reminder that our sisterhood was eternal. The desert was still brutal, its heat a fire, its silence a weight. But we were fiercer, our hearts a tide that could not be stopped. We planted barley in the valley's narrow strips, wove mats for trade, taught the children to read, to fight, to dream. Years passed, the desert softening around us, its sands holding our story, our strength. Nabat grew older, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes still fierce, her hands still steady as she wrote. Kia's songs became legends, sung by children who had never known the Nile, their voices carrying our defiance to the heavens. I grew quieter, my body worn, but my heart full, my spirit unbroken. The priests' power waned, their temples crumbling, their God silent as the people rose, inspired by the fires we had lit, the chains we had broken. We were not the only rebels now, we were a movement, a river that flowed through the land, carving a new world. I stood with Nebet and Kia, the desert wind cool against my skin, the stars a canopy above. The valley was our home, its cliffs our guardians, its sands our legacy. I thought of my mother, her warnings a distant echo, her pain a fire that had fueled us. I thought of Iset, of Anuket, of Sati, of all the women whose names lived in Kia's songs, whose strength lived in our hands. The world was still brutal, its edges sharp, its burdens heavy, but we had changed it, not with bronze or stone, but with our will, our love, our refusal to kneel. I looked at my daughters, their faces lit by the firelight, their eyes carrying the weight of our fight, the promise of our future. They were my river, my fire, my stone. They were the women who had walked through the desert, who had fought through the dark, who had risen through the ashes. And as the dawn broke, I whispered to them, not of gods or kings, but of us, of the women who endure, who defy, who build, and who carry the strength of the ages in their souls, a strength that will outlast the Nile itself. This is the land of eternal stone, where the sun burns and the river flows, where the gods watch but do not speak. I am Merit, daughter of no one, mother of two, a woman of Thebes who walked through fire and emerged whole. My story is not carved on temple walls, not sung by poets in the courts of Amun. It is carried in the wind, in the songs of my daughters, in the hands of the women who follow. To be a woman here was brutal, a life of labor, of loss, of chains unseen, but it was also to be unbreakable, to be the river that carves the stone, the fire that lights the dark, the will that shapes the world. We are the women of Egypt, our names unwritten, our strength eternal, and we will never be silenced.